Right, well, I'm afraid I don't have my sackcloth with me today. For those of you who were here last time I spoke, I put on some sackcloth and put ashes on my head. I asked you if you wanted the good news first or the bad news, and I started with the bad news, and then the good news of Jesus putting his robe of righteousness on us, which was represented by Dave's wonderful coat. So today, for a change, I'm going to talk about a great celebration. Hooray! But then I'm going to leave you with some warnings. Okay. So the story so far, just do my usual thing where I can never work this thing. Why can I never work this thing? Oh, I went backwards. Perhaps I should be pointing it the other way, I don't know. Never thought I was a science teacher, would you? Still going backwards? No, okay. Right. So let's have a look at the story so far. I'm hoping by now, after these, I think, 10 maybe sermons we've had, that you do know the story of Nehemiah, but just in case you were asleep through that. So God's people had been exiled to foreign lands when their land was taken over. And then in 3 waves they were allowed to return to Jerusalem. The final wave was led by Nehemiah. And when he got there, he was devastated by the state of the place. Now his predecessors, Zerubbabel, great name, and Ezra had actually rebuilt the temple, but the walls were still broken down. And Nehemiah prayed, and he made plans to rebuild the broken walls. He got everybody involved, almost everybody. Lots of people were involved. They joined in, and they faced a lot of opposition, but they were actually ready to fight for God's work. Remember the trowel and the sword. And then we saw some economic oppression from the outsiders and fellow Jews, but Nehemiah stood up for justice amongst the people. He remained focused. He had some pretty worrying distractions, but he remained focused. And the wall was finished. Hooray! Then Nehemiah assembled all the people and recorded who they were. And together they read God's word and responded to it with prayer and with joy and with action. Having built the physical wall up, Nehemiah and Ezra were then rebuilding the spiritual lives of God's people by reading God's word, which is what we're going to be doing, and following what it said. That's the key. They followed what it said. They made a new covenant. Remember, Mark spoke about that last week. The people recommitted themselves to God. And actually 1 in 10 of them went to live in Jerusalem, because mainly they were living outside of Jerusalem. And 1 in 10 of them actually went back to Jerusalem to live there. And that was a big commitment. You know, it was a new life, something different to what they were used to. And it reminded me, I had a conversation with one of our lovely church members a few weeks ago, and she said that her and her family decided a long time ago that actually they would commit to going to church every week. Obviously, you know, we can't do that all the time, but you know, they committed themselves to going to church every week and serving God's people. So we've spent quite a bit of time going through this book. Nehemiah, if you think about Nehemiah, he had lots of characteristics that Jesus had. He was a model leader, really, a great example to us and to others. He was obviously charismatic. He was a man of principle, and a man of prayer and completely focused on God. And it's humbling for all of us, I think, to see how focused on God he really was. So let's have a look at the last two chapters. And the first thing we see at the start of Nehemiah 12 is another list of names. So I'm going to confess here, I'm rubbish at remembering names. I don't know what it is. It's a terrible thing for a teacher not to know names. It's a pretty bad thing for an elder not to remember names. But I'm just no good at names. When I was teaching, I spent 2 years in my first school, and then I moved on to another school. And I was there for 8 years. So by the end of the 8th year, I knew most of the kids, except the new ones that were coming in. And my last school that I was taught in, I was there for 16 years, so I knew them pretty well. But it was something which I find difficult. Have you noticed Mark is quite annoying because he seems to know everybody's name now. He's only been here a few times. It's just one of those things. It doesn't mean I'm not, I'm less interested in people than Mark is. It just means I can't remember names. So when I first read Nehemiah, I thought, oh no, more names. And I just skipped through them. I thought, oh no, this is a waste of ink. So why are there so many names? Let's have a look at where they appear. Oh, can we just move me on one? Let's see to manage that. Yeah, okay. So the names of the people in Nehemiah 3, there was all the names of the people that built the wall. Remember those? And then we had a list of tribes and families who returned to Jerusalem in the first wave. That was before Nehemiah. That list in Nehemiah 7 even includes the number of animals that there were. I'm glad that he didn't write down the names of all the animals, but he put all the animals in. It included 6,720 donkeys. So who counted all the donkeys? I want to know. And then there was a list of the leaders and the Levites who stood with Ezra and translated and explained the scriptures to the people. And then there were the people that Mark was talking about last week, who were the Levites and the priests who signed the document, the New Covenant. And then there was the 1 in 10, who I've just mentioned, who settled in Jerusalem. And then there were the priests and the Levites who came in the first wave, and then generations after that. So that included some of the detail that was in chapter 7, but there was no mention of donkeys in that one. It's a shame. And finally, there was the leaders and priests and Levites who led the dedication on the wall, which I'm going to talk about next. Now, over the years, I've come to understand that individuals are named because they mattered. They mattered to Nehemiah, and more importantly, they mattered to God. We are all different. Have you noticed that? We are all different. We have our own personalities. We have our own gifts. We have our own ways of interacting with people. God made us different. He didn't make us all the same. He knows you and he knows me intimately, and he has a place for you in his kingdom. Now, I'm not being soppy here. Have a look at Psalm 139. So my knitted people, there's my lovely knitted people. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Isn't that lovely? So we are all important to God. If we've given our lives to Jesus, we each have that perfect shape to be fitted into the body of Christ, his church. We are all a part of God's building project. And I just thought I'd grab a bit of Lego. Right, there's Barbara. There's Dave. Oh, Dave's a bit bigger than Barbara. There's Debbie. And so on and so on. And they all fit beautifully together. I won't carry on. You get the idea. I've seen that Lego there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and this morning it was hidden over there somewhere. I thought, oh no, where's my Lego? So we are knitted together. We are working together. We are part of God's building blocks. You are a building block of God. And that's why if anyone misses a Sunday, then they are missed, because there is a gap where there should be you. Okay, so let's have a celebration. Next one. Okay, celebrate good times. So, yes, we know that song. So God had been with his people. The walls were built. He protected them. Remember, Nehemiah had a plan, but it was God that was protecting them. And they rediscovered his word. They rediscovered their identity, and they obeyed his word. So the physical wall was complete, and their spiritual lives had been built up too. So it was definitely a time to celebrate. And Nehemiah brought the Levites and singers to the city from the surrounding towns and villages to dedicate the walls of Jerusalem to God. So I'm going to read a bit of a chunk from Nehemiah 12. This is verse 31 to 43, if you've got a Bible, you can follow it. But despite what I said earlier, I'm actually going to miss out the names, because otherwise we'll be here all morning. I'm not going to put it on the screen, but you might want to just close your eyes, if you like, and think about it. Or you can look at the map that is on the screen now. But just imagine the scene. Imagine the noise, the smells, the sights. Now, it doesn't actually say it in the passage, but I'd like to imagine this as a torchlit procession. It says, this is Nehemiah speaking, I had the leaders of Judah go up on top of the wall. I also assigned 2 large choirs to give thanks. One was to proceed on top of the wall to the right, towards the dung gate. Hosea and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with, and there's a big list of names, as well as some priests with trumpets, and also Zechariah, and a big list of names, with musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra, the teacher of the law, led the procession. At the fountain gate, they continued directly up the steps to the city of David, onto the ascent to the wall, and passed above the site of David's palace to the water gate on the east. So this must have been a substantial wall for them to be able to all walk across it at the top of it. The second choir proceeded in the opposite direction. I followed them on top of the wall together with half the people, past the Tower of the Ovens to the broad wall, over the gate of Ephraim, the Jeshurun gate, the Fish gate, the Tower of Haniel, and the Tower of the 100, as far as the Sheep gate. At the gate of the guard, they stopped. And the next picture has got an imagining of what that might have looked like. The two choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God. So did I, together with half the officials as well as the priests. And there's another list of names, with their trumpets. The choirs sang under the direction of Jezariah, and on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. So that sounds like a pretty impressive celebration. But Nehemiah, as we know, was a very practical man. And at the same time, he then put people in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, the first fruits and the tithes. So everyone had to bring in their contribution to the storehouses, and then they would be used, that food would be used to feed the people who were in charge of the temple, so the priests and the Levites. They were supposed to give a tenth of what they grew. And actually we do this in our church. We give a tenth of our income to the church. If you're not doing that, then have a chat with us and see why we think we should be doing that. So that 10% doesn't just go to Dave's salary, although some of it does. It also goes to all the work that the church does. And also, our church then gives away 10% of that income into other charities and to regions beyond, which does a lot of work all over the world. So that principle, that tithes and offerings, goes back a long way, and it's still going on today. So what a great place to end the book of Nehemiah, I wish. You can almost hear them saying, and they all lived happily ever after. But there is always a but, isn't there? The last chapter of Nehemiah is actually a warning. It's a warning not to drift back to our old ways. And do you remember the start of Nehemiah? He told the king that he was going to go. The king gave him permission to go, but he said he was going to come back. And it was about 12 years before he actually went back to Babylon, to the king. We don't know how long he was there. It's not very clear from the scripture. But when he went back to Jerusalem, he was not a happy man. All the people had turned back to their old ways. There's a great proverb, I like this one: as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. So let's not be the returning dogs eating their vomit. Do you remember the golden calf? Next one. This was mentioned in Exodus 32. It was when Moses went up to the mountain. He was there for 40 days, and he came back down with the tablets, with the Ten Commandments. And when he got there, he found that people had made an image of a calf, a golden calf, and were worshipping that instead of God. It only took them 40 days, and they had drifted away already. So what Moses did was he smashed the Ten Commandments on the ground, he burnt the calf, he ground it to powder, he scattered it on the water and made the Israelites drink the water. So it's pretty drastic. And I don't want to return to the things that I did and the thoughts that I had before I was a Christian. But we have an enemy who's always constantly trying to drag us back to our vomit, if you like, the things that we used to do. Could have been anything. Could have been, you may have been malicious to people. You may have been insecure. You may have had self-loathing. You may have been gossiping. You may have taken too much alcohol. You may have taken drugs. You may have been looking at pornography. All sorts of things that you may have done before you're a Christian. Watch out that you don't start going back to those things. Okay. So what did Nehemiah do when he found out what was going on? Well, there was a guy called Eliashib, who was a priest, and he was put in charge of the storehouses. And what he did while Nehemiah was away, he actually lent one of the rooms, one of the storehouses, to our old friend Tobiah. Do you remember Tobiah? So he was not a Jew, and he was constantly trying to go against Nehemiah, if you remember from the previous part of the story. So he shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been in the temple area where the storehouses were. And he shouldn't have been taking up the space that should have been full of all the contributions for the Levites and the priests. So what happened was that a lot of the Levites went back to the fields because they couldn't make a living. They weren't given the offerings that they were due, and they went back to where they were before. So this was a pretty bad state. Tobiah was taking up the room that should have been God's place. So what did Nehemiah do? Did he say, "Oh, Tobiah, you really shouldn't be in here because you're not a Jew, and you weren't very nice to me years ago"? No, he didn't. He chucked him out. And that's one next picture. Hopefully. Yeah, there he is. Going mad in the storehouse and chucking Tobiah out. Now, Tobiah wasn't just a person, I don't think. I think he actually represents the evil one. He represents the devil in our own lives. He was a leech. He was draining the resources of God's people, and he was taking the place where God should be. He tried to get people serving him and not God. Now, if I'm spending too much time on something that God does not want me to spend time on, then I've got a Tobiah in my life. And I just want you just to think. You don't have to make anything up, but is there any Tobiah in your life at the moment? You don't need to tell me, but is there a Tobiah in your life? Are you trying to make him comfortable and settled and just, accepting him there? So think about that for a minute. So how do we get rid of our Tobiahs? Well, Nehemiah was ruthless. He chucked him out. Next slide. We've got a slide there just showing a soldier with a shield and a sword. And the point is, we need to be drastic with our sin. We need to cut it out. Mark 9:43-47 tells us that Jesus tells us to chop off our hand or our foot if it causes us to sin, or to pluck out our eye if it causes us to sin. Now, obviously, Jesus is using picture language. We're not literally going to pluck out our eye, but it shows the importance of getting rid of sin in our lives. And Dave said a thing which hit me a few weeks ago. Next one. It's a picture of the Dusty Bible there. You know that one. I'd like putting that one in my PowerPoints. Dave said, "Sin will keep me from this book. This book will keep me from sin." So we need to take drastic action. We need to keep reading God's word. And Nehemiah also, when he went back, he found that people were trading on the Sabbath. And he told the people to lock the doors so the merchants couldn't come in. And they were just sitting around waiting, thinking he'd change his mind. I love that picture. Just sort of, maybe we can come in. But he told them to go away in very strident terms. And the other thing he did, the other drastic thing he did, was that he found out that people, the Jewish people, God's people, were still marrying foreigners. And instead of just saying, "Oh, I don't think that's a really good idea," think about Solomon. He married all these foreign women, and that was his downfall. No, he didn't. What he did was he called down curses on the leaders, beat them up, and pulled out their hair. So it's perhaps not the sort of thing Dave would do if he found out you were sinning, but it just shows the importance of being drastic against sin. Yeah. So the people at that time, they had Nehemiah to put them back on the right path, which he did. Now 1,000 years earlier, they had Moses, and there are many of God's prophets and judges and guides in between those two times. You might not quite cotton onto this, but if you read the Bible in date order, Nehemiah would be the last book in the Old Testament. There was 1,000 years between Moses and Nehemiah. Our next perfect guide was Jesus. That was 400 years later. It was Jesus on the cross. And it says in Hebrews 1, "In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe." That's our Jesus. So nowadays we can listen to people like Dave and other preachers and teachers that we trust. But most importantly, Jesus has given us the Holy Spirit to help us. Now there's no way that we can remove the Tobias in our life without the Holy Spirit. So we need to ask the Holy Spirit to help us. He's there for our help. He is called the Helper. So let's lean on him, ask him to help you. No matter what you do, this is really important, remember, if you've given your life to Jesus and you've become a Christian, you cannot lose your salvation. It cannot be taken away. It's done deal, it's sealed. Yeah. So remember that. So no matter how much you sin, as long as you confess your sin to God and genuinely ask for his forgiveness, then he will forgive you. Remember Jesus on the cross, he cried out, "It is finished." Now, he didn't mean that his life was over. What he meant is that he'd finished the job that the Father had sent him to do. And because of Jesus, God does not see your sins. He will accept you on that day when you are no longer on this earth. However, I don't want to get to heaven and say, "Phew, I made it, thanks Jesus." Group one. What I want to do is I want to help build what God has for me and for you. God wants us to build his church with him. Now, he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't need to build his kingdom through us, but that's what he chooses to do, and what a privilege that is. Do you remember Vicky's post-it notes a while ago? Yeah? Do you remember what you put on your post-it note? If you did. Have you done anything towards making that come true? If not, then maybe revisit that. Yeah. Sorry, my brain has just gone. Right. Yeah, I think over this series we've looked at a lot of stuff, and I think it's important to remember how Nehemiah behaved. He prayed. He got people working together. We are in fellowship together. It's important to get involved with your church. It's important to love each other. It's important to be focused on God. It's important to build each other up. It's important to be able to spot the opposition. It's important to take God's word seriously and to rely on his Holy Spirit and to tell others about Jesus. Now, all that sounds quite heavy, but we have the Holy Spirit and we have salvation. Jesus has done it for us. Why would we not want to do it for him in a way? What I want is when I get to heaven, and I want this to be the case for all of you, that God will say to me, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So let me just finish off with a summary I've now left behind. We are all important to God. We've all got our place. We're all a brick in the wall. So celebrate what God's done through Jesus. Don't return to your old ways. Don't go back to licking up your vomit. Be drastic with sin. Listen to God's word. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you and build each other up. Thank you. Let's pray. Thank you. Yeah, Lord, I just want to pray that we take this to heart, that we listen to what's been said, Lord, and we just take you more and more seriously in our lives, Lord, and help us build each other up, help us celebrate what you've done for us, help us love you and love each other more and more. Amen.
Well done, Pete.